Conversation that I like to kind of talk about today is this concept of the God complex and how that relates to our issues around diversity and inclusion, and particularly sexual harassment in a hostile work environment. What the God complex basically says is that I would like to be God. And I think for a lot of people that is the motivation or the hidden motivation in their behavior, is that they would like to be the controllers of their environment. They like to be the manipulators of their possibilities, the captains of their souls. They embody Invictus. And one of the things that we start to understand about our human existence is that, in fact, we cannot be God. We cannot control what necessarily happens to us. We have control over our choices, but we don't have control over the way that we shape either our destiny or other people's destiny. And so what we come to realize is that if I cannot be God, I will settle to be your God. Which typically means that if I can't be the person who creates something out of nothing, then as you'll hear young people oftentimes say, I'm the boss of you. Or you'll hear the opposite, where kids will declare, you're not the boss of me. What they're saying is, you can't tell me what to do. You are not my God. And a lot of times when we get in positions of power, we get that confused. William Glasser summed it up best when he said that people do what they want to do. That's it. People do what they want to do. Our job as leaders is not to get in the way of them doing what it is that they want to do, and actually to corral or to help people focus on what it is that the organization wants them to do, and not necessarily what we want to do. And so this God complex gets us into a lot of trouble when we try to exert our will on other people. And so a lot of times it shows up as discrimination in the workplace, or we will see that we're biased in our interviewing. We'll notice that if we look around our organization, that all the people seem to look very similar to themselves. And it's interesting because it's not a phenomenon that is necessarily built on a particular race, but we all can fall prey given whatever so-called racial distinctions that we give ourselves. For example, typically when I have this conversation about discrimination, or I have a conversation about the interviewing process, why our organizations don't look any different, 40 years, 60 years later, after the civil rights movement, why they don't look much different. And we come back to this discrimination, and it's easy for people to go to white people as being the core or the root of the problem. But I've had some consultations with folks that are in Texas, where the large Spanish-speaking population does not believe that people who don't speak Spanish can be beneficial to the organization. So, and then I've also been in settings where African Americans will only hire or look after African Americans, and so those things become problematic in terms of looking at how our organizations move forward in productive ways. And so I want to spend some time talking about this idea of discrimination. We're going to talk about impact versus intent, and intent versus impact. We'll talk about micro-inequities and microaggressions, and we'll also talk about some important legal opportunities that we've had to really advance. And some of those we've missed, and some of those we're capitalizing on. So we'll spend some time talking about that. What I'd like to talk a little bit about is why we have this kind of God complex. And what is it that we can do to kind of overcome this complex? And one of the things we have to understand is that so I was a high school teacher for a number of years, and so a lot of the concepts that I give, the concepts that I share, kind of come from that that basis. And so they may seem very simplistic, and I want you to just walk with that simplicity until we're able to get to some higher order ways of thinking and use some of the principles in these simplistic ways to actually develop more sophisticated ways of interacting and having conversations. So, first of all, when we talk about the human soul, we have to ask ourselves, what is humanity? So what does it mean to be human? Who is a human? How do humans act? What do humans do? What are our expectations of humans that we don't necessarily have of my dog? Right? So what expectations do we have for humans and humanity that we don't necessarily have for our pets, our cats, our dogs, our ferrets, if you will? There are some expectations of humanity that are only reserved for humans, right? And so some of those things are, we expect humans to be empathetic. We expect humans to bounce back from hard times. We anticipate that human beings are able to negotiate conflicts, that we live by rules of law, that we'll be civil, that we'll interact in ways that benefit all of us, that our relationships will be mutually beneficial. Those are some of the things that we expect, the highest things that we expect of human beings. We also know that human beings fall short of all of those high expectations. So humanity is a very complex thing, but it is something that we have to give other humans. And I would say that there are two things to recognize about humanity. That humanity that humanity can only be recognized when we see someone else as being human. So our humanity is recognized when I see someone else as being human as well. And so when I am in authentic relationship and I recognize someone else's humanity, that actually helps to define my own humanity. And so recognizing someone else's humanity actually builds my own humanity. At the same time, that recognition is great, but I also have to be in service of other human beings because they will also be in service of me. And so our best examples of humanity, or what it means to fully be human, are those individuals in our history that have given service to our humanity. And so therefore their humanity is magnified and amplified. And just a few names that I'll drop in terms of looking at service as a way to define your humanity. Gandhi was one of those individuals. Mother Teresa was one of those individuals. Jesus Christ was one of those individuals. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was one of those individuals. Nelson Mandela was one of those individuals. These individuals who understood who humanity could be and who humanity was by recognizing the humanity in everyone, and then secondarily being of service to that humanity. And so to overcome this God complex, we have to recognize other people's humanity and also be in service of those other individuals. At the same time, we have to be protective and thoughtful of our own existence. But these two things allow, I think, that third thing to also happen. And so when we talk about humanity, we also have to talk about the human soul. And it is my belief that the human soul is made up of two parts. That it is a physical body, and it is also the animating power, which we'll call the spirit. And so, and I give this example from very practical application. So my grandmother passed, and in my religious and cultural background, one of the things that we do is we have an open casket funeral. And so they laid her out in this beautiful, pearl and gold and silver inlaid box. Now, I don't know how or what she's going to do with this beautiful box, but my family said that's what we're going to do, so we're going to do that. So she's in this box, and so they open up the top of the casket, and my grandmother is laying there. And people are walking by, and they're saying things to her that they wish they could have or missed the opportunity to say to her while she was alive, and they're doing all this stuff, and you'll have that one relative who can never keep it together, and so my aunt is like, "Oh, grandma!" It's just losing it, right? So and everybody has those relatives who just can't keep it together in these public settings. It's very embarrassing for everybody. But at any rate, so one of the things that I recognized was that as people were talking and sharing and engaging with my grandmother, she never responded. And she didn't respond because there's nobody home. There's nobody. So her body was there, but her spirit was not. And afterwards, what we typically do in my family tradition is that we have a repast dinner. So there's a dinner after the funeral that everybody gets together. And one of the things that we recognize is that we were sharing photos, we were looking at pictures, telling jokes, giving all sorts of anecdotes about my grandmother, anecdotes about my grandmother's spirit and stories and euphemisms for who she was and all sorts of stuff. And so we're having all of these conversations, and it starts to feel as if my grandmother is there. It feels almost as if she's there, but we all know that she is not, because her spirit is not connected with her body, and so her spirit becomes powerless. And when the body does not have its spirit, the body becomes a thing. Now, what do we do with things? How do we treat things? We don't treat things very respectfully, typically. For example, I don't give a lot of consideration for how my hammer feels when I toss it into my toolbox. I don't give that a whole lot of consideration. I don't give a lot of consideration for, how or why my television is not working. I expect my television to work. No matter how many other times I've ever watched my television, this particular time, I'm expecting my television to work. So I have some expectations of things that because they don't have power, because they don't have the ability to talk back, they're not animated, I have certain expectations, and I will treat them a certain kind of way. And so a lot of times when we talk about this humanity, what happens is that people aren't they don't feel like they're fully human. They succumb to illusions that are created to separate them from their wholeness, from their complete humanity. And so one of the things that we need to recognize is that there are all these things competing to crack the human soul. Some of those things are lust. Lust for things. So I need to get these things so that I feel whole. I need to drink this or be in relationship with these types of people so that I can be whole. That people's brokenness, right? So tragedies or mishaps or problems that people may think that they have in their lives could contribute to this cracked soul or these cracks in their soul. People who are in a state of want, right? So who don't necessarily see or recognize all the things that they have that are going for them, but are in a state of wanting things. And also folks who are in a state of lack. Folks who say, well, I don't have. What they will typically try to do is accumulate these things, thinking that will solve the hole in their soul. And so how do those things get cracked? Well, all of these things not only are ways that people need to fill those things, but they're also the same things that sometimes contribute to the cracks themselves. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I've watched lots of television commercials because I like watching television. And I have seen very few television commercials that actually make me feel good about myself. Most of them are demonstrating to me how unhappy I am without their product, how broken I am without their product, how much I need their product to make me a whole person. A lot of those commercials don't make me feel good about myself. Although I will say, some of those herpes commercials, those people seem to be living the life. They seem to be, jumping off of, skydiving and but I don't know that I want herpes so that I can live that without. Yeah. All right. Back to the lesson. So when we talk about that, we need to recognize that there is a little monster, a little minion, a little imp, if you will, that is waiting for the cracked soul. And that little imp is called free market capitalism. Free market capitalism. And basically what it says is, once you're cracked, then I can sell something to you. I can sell you the answer to your problem. I can sell you what it is that you need to become a complete and a whole person. And so that becomes very problematic, because one thing that we know is that you can't buy enough. You can't have enough money to fill the void in that soul. Philip Seymour Hoffman had everything. Academy Award winning actor, lots of money, friends, all the trappings that we're supposed to have, but ultimately he had a hole in his soul. Look at folks in the entertainment industry. You can go down the list from Elvis to Tupac to Michael Jackson to Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. All of these great people had a hole in their soul. Now, here's the funny thing. So, somebody said, well, why did you mention Tupac? All those other people committed suicide and Tupac didn't. Well, this is very interesting, because one of the things that Tupac said, and I thought that I think is great for this conversation, is that Tupac often said, only God can judge me. And the funny thing is, when God does judge you, you typically don't like the judgment. And what I mean, and so why do I use Tupac as an example of this cracked soul, is because all of the violent behavior, all of the overly verbose and masculine tendencies, the over-sexualization of himself or women, adds to this cracked soul. And it adds to lust and brokenness and want and lack. And these are some of the things that people have that contribute not only to their cracked soul, but also are problematic, because we keep reaching for these things and they evaporate as soon as, it's like, I don't know if you've ever tried to, catch something that was floating in the water, and the more you grasp at the thing in the water, the further away it gets from you. Until we get to a point that we realize that our humanity is not based on those things, but it is based on the fact that we were born human. We're born whole. But these things outside of us try to convince us or try to remind us of some of our inadequacies and drive and create these cracks. And so what we're looking for is human wholeness, where we have the spirit and the body are knitted together so tightly that nothing can come between these things and delude us or give us their illusions of who they think we are. One of the things that I think was most sinister about the American slave trade was its systematic method of trying to destroy the human soul by killing the spirit. And one of the things that we understand about people all throughout the world is that we are resilient beings. And it's that resilience that allows us to keep going and to be productive and to engage in our own lives. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is just take a break, and we'll come back and start talking about some of our other concepts. All right?